All right, in part two, we're going to look at the formulas and apply the formulas for circumference and area of a circle. We know what area is. Area is the inside, how many square units, little squares like square inches or square feet fit inside of this circle. What is circumference, though? Circumference is a fancy name for perimeter. It's the only geometric two-dimensional figure that has a fancy name for perimeter. Circumference is the distance around. Just like a square, distance around the square, we add up the sides, but circumference, there are no sides. Okay, but it is still the distance around it, measured in inches or feet, not square inches or square feet. It's a linear measure. So there are actually two formulas for circumference of a circle. One of them is 2 times pi times r, the radius. R is the radius. Or you can use the formula pi times the diameter. What happens here is 2 times the radius is actually the diameter, so they replace the d, the 2 and the r with the d here. So you can do it either way. I usually use just 2 times pi times the radius, even when I know the diameter. What's the relationship between the radius and the diameter? We'll see it again in a minute. But to get the radius, you take the diameter and divide it by 2. Or if you wanted the diameter, you would take the radius and multiply it times 2. It takes 2 of those. We'll see that a little later. The area formula is pi times the radius squared. And you have your pi button on your calculator. We'll see that in a little bit. All right, let's go use a couple of examples. Now this first example and first couple are not in your notes. So just on the back of your notes, sketch this circle, put in this segment, 12 inches. Of course, we know this segment is called the radius. This is our r. And we're going to find the circumference and area. So again, our formula for circumference is 2 times pi times the radius. There we go, 2 times pi times the radius. You can take your calculator, I'll pull it up here. Clear this out. 1. So 2 times pi is right up here in yellow on my calculator. It's up on top of the key, so I've got to hit the second key and then that key, and you'll get the pi symbol. And then times 12 inches. And we're going to round these to the nearest tenth. We're not going to do exact answers, really. I'll show you a little bit about it right now. But we're going to always round our answer to the nearest tenth. So this will round to 75 point. This is a 3. The next number is a 9. So we round it up to 0.4. 75.4. The exact answer, sometimes they do exact answers. I'm not going to do it in yours right now, but sometimes you'll see it in test. And what they do is multiply the numbers, but not times pi. So 2 times 12 is 24, and then they just put 24 times pi. That's what's called an exact answer, when pi is left in there and not multiplied out. But again, we're going to do all ours to approximations. That's why I put in this approximately equal to and round to the nearest tenth. Area, the formula was pi r squared, pi times the radius to the second power. So we set it up like something like this. Our calculator, I'll take pi, second, and then the pi key, times 12. I don't have to use the parentheses or anything, to the second power. That's good enough. And rounded to the nearest tenth, we'll hit 452 point. This is a 3, but the next number is an 8, so I got to round that up to 0.4. 452.4. And this is area. These are square inches. You know, when you square this, you get 12 inches times 12 inches, or inches squared. Square inches. Make sure you put units in your answer. Again, an exact answer would just be doing the numbers and not multiplying times pi. So 12 squared is 144 times pi. They'd write their answer something like this with the square units in there. But again, we are just doing the approximate answer, rounding to the nearest tenth. We'll multiply everything out. Multiply the pi. So there's one that's not on your thing. Again, that should be on the back of your notes. Put it on the back of one of the pages. Here's another one that's not in your notes, just a basic, use the formula. This time we're given the diameter is 10 centimeters. So you have to find the radius for the area formula, and I'll show you the two circumference formulas where you use the radius or the diameter. So I'm going to go ahead and calculate the radius now, and we take the diameter and divide it in half is a radius. Just half of this diameter is a radius. So the diameter is 10 divided by 2 is just 5 centimeters is the radius. So here I believe I use the radius formula for circumference. The next one I'll use the diameter formula. This says take 2 times pi times the radius, set it up there, multiply them all out. Don't do any exact ones. You should be able to round this to 31.4 to the nearest 10th place. You get the same answer using the other formula, taking pi times the diameter. So pi times the whole diameter there instead of the radius will still give you, rounded to the nearest 10th, 31.4. Now our area formula, we had to have the radius. It doesn't have one with diameter. So we're going to take pi times the radius to the second power and multiply it all out, and it should round to 78.5. You should practice this with your calculator. Remember to put in the square units or the linear units for circumference, and see if you have any trouble getting those answers or rounding them to the same number I have, or see if I have a mistake. Now we'll go ahead and go to back to the notes page. This is in your notes page, not a basic one. You can see in this picture, first of all, you can scratch out the exact answers. We're just going to round to the nearest 10th. No exact C, no exact area. We're just doing the rounded answers for circumference and area here. But as I said, there is no radius or diameter in here. We're going to have to solve for it. And hopefully you can see that we've got this right triangle here. And we know two of the sides, and hopefully that brings up to mind Pythagorean's theorem. Leg squared plus this leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared. So we set that up. Remember, the legs are the two sides that make up the right angle here. Those are the two that go together on this side of the equal sign. So they are to the second power. So we have 16 to the second power plus the other leg is also 16 to the second power equals the hypotenuse to the second power. I put C here like in the formula a squared plus b. You could put D for diameter. That's what we're solving for, this whole side, which is a diameter. You may do that. I think I do it at the end. So I square these both and add them. 16 squared plus 16 squared is 512 equals that diameter squared. Now we need to get rid of the square, so we do square root to both sides. This just cancels out the power over here, and the square root of 512 rounded to the nearest 10th is 22.6. Again, that's our C side, our hypotenuse, which is the diameter, D. Now I go ahead and I'm going to solve for the radius. I know for the radius I take the diameter divided by 2. So 22.6 divided by 2 is 11.3. Now I'll go ahead and use my circumference and area formulas. You always use this one, 2 pi r, instead of that other one, diameter. You can use either one you want. Alright, so 2 times pi times the radius. We just figured out the radius was 11.3, so 2 times pi times 11.3 is rounded to the nearest 10th. Check this out on your calculator. Make sure you know how to round this one. See if you have any questions. It actually comes out to 71.0. And these didn't have units, so in the answer they just put, okay, 71.0, some kind of units. Of course, in the area it'll have units squared, square units. The area is pi times the radius squared. The radius again was 11.3. One mistake you can do is use the diameter instead of the radius in this formula. So pi times the radius squared comes out to approximately 401.1 square units, round to the nearest tenth. So put those answers in the answer blank too. And we'll look at one more example. I'm going to skip this quick check now. That next quick check, you may pause this video and try and do it, and then later when you're done with this video, come up and let me check those answers so I know you're doing it right. Now this problem we're going to change a little bit on your paper. This is example 4, because I want to do one with trig. So here's what I need you to do is cross out this side. This side is not 24. We're going to get rid of it and give you a problem where you're only given one side in the right triangle. But you have to be given an angle too. So this angle, put in 35 degrees for this angle right here. So we know this is 35, this side is 10. We want to know this side right here, which is the diameter. So we're going to set up a trig equation. So of course we label our sides with respect to this angle. We know that this side right here, and you can write this in on your notes. Again, make sure you cross out that number there and put in the 35-degree angle. This is the problem I want to do with this one. So there's the hypotenuse. Opposite this angle is this 10 side. So label that in your notes. Here's the opposite. And of course this blank side is the adjacent. So we know we're solving, this is what we want to know, the hypotenuse. I mean, you can label that. I'm going to label it D, little d, the diameter. Okay. So we're solving for D. We need to use that side, the hypotenuse, and the side we know, 10, the opposite. And on the bathroom door are those trig functions. Opposite and hypotenuse is sine. Sine of the angle, which was 35 degrees, equals opposite over hypotenuse, which is we're calling D right now for diameter. Then we're going to cross multiply. Put this over 1. So this cross product, D times the sine of 35. I've written right here. The other cross product is 1 times 10, which is 10. So we're solving for D. We need to divide by the sine of 35 degrees. So this cancels out, and I get D equals 10 divided by the sine of 35 degrees. Make sure your calculator is in degrees before you calculate it, and round to the nearest tenth. I got 17.4. So this diameter is 17.4. So the next step before I calculate the circumference and area, I like finding the radius. So 17.4, I'm sorry, the radius equals the diameter divided by 2, 17.4 divided by 2, which is 8.7. Now you're ready to go ahead and calculate the circumference. And again, these are the approximates. Go ahead and cross out the exacts. I don't want to mess with those. Boom, boom. Forget about that. We're going to get the approximates and just round to the nearest tenth. So I keep putting this formula to drill it in your head. Circumference 2 times pi times the radius. So 2 times pi times 8.7 was the radius, not 17.4. And that's approximately 54.7. They didn't have any units, so they just put the word units there. Now remember, area is square units, and it has the square in the problem. That's where we get the square units from, squaring this radius, these units, whatever they were. In this case, they didn't put them. So pi times the radius squared, pi times 8.7 to the second power rounds to about 237.8. So then there's another quick check. Do those, let me check your answers, and then we'll work on the practice problems. Good work.